Yeah, so we're all about helping churches and nonprofits amplify their impact through digital marketing, and one of the big ways we do that is through the Google Ad Grant.
Your clients, but are you seeing that churches might be familiar with it? They might have the grant themselves, but they're trying to take full advantage of the 10,000 spend each month.
Quote me on this, but I think it was Google or some reputable organization that came out with a statistic that said nonprofits are only utilizing about $300 per month on average of this Google Grant.
Mm, yeah, well, especially with a local church context, um, that's it seems like it would be such a huge driver for people looking for a church in. Welcome back to the Ministry Growth Show. Today on the show, I'm going to be talking with Judson Aulie, founder and managing director of Click Nonprofit. Judson, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate it. It's great being here.
So, Judson, can you tell us a little bit about your company? What is it that you guys do at Click Nonprofit?
Yeah, so we're all about helping churches and nonprofits amplify their impact through digital marketing, and one of the big ways we do that is through the Google Ad Grant, and we help churches and nonprofits acquire this $10,000 Google Ad Grant that Google offers, and then we actually help them manage those ads as well. So basically, we help them utilize this grant to drive people to their website who are actively looking for things that they have to offer. So we're all about helping churches and nonprofits be able to show up at the top of Google when people are searching for them. So like for a church, maybe someone's searching for churches near me or online church. We basically help those churches show up at the top of Google with this Google Ad Grant. And the awesome thing for the church is they have this, $10,000 budget every single month. And they don't have to spend any money on those clicks that they're getting from those ads. So that's kind of what we do. We help with this Google Grant, and there's a bunch of ways, and I can get into that if you want, how we actually help help these churches and nonprofits really maximize that grant. But that's our main service is this Google Grant, and then we also help with SEO and content as well.
Mm. Yeah, and as a ministry that has worked with you and used your services, that was one of the things that we ran into when we started applying for this grant was, okay, we've got this grant, but man, this is going to be a full-time job just for myself or someone from my team to be able to go take advantage of this $10,000 spend. And so I think we experienced that as one of your clients, but are you seeing that churches might be familiar with it? They might have the grant themselves, but they're trying to take full advantage of the 10,000 spend each month, and they're getting $300, $400, $500 a month out of it, and that becomes the opportunity for you guys to step in and say, hey, we can help you manage this and take full advantage of that $10,000 spend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of times that's what we run into. So, I mean, there's two things. A lot of times a church or nonprofit comes across our website, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't even know this existed." Don't even know this Google Ad Grant is something that we could even utilize. That's one response that we get. But a lot of times we have churches or nonprofits or ministries that have been trying to utilize the grant. And while it's amazing that it's available for nonprofits and churches, the difficult part is really maximizing the value out of it. So we do get a lot of churches that come to us and say, "Hey, we've been trying to maximize this. We've only been able to utilize a few $100s." A few years back, I think it was Google. Maybe don't quote me on this, but I think it was Google or some reputable organization that came out with a statistic that said nonprofits are only utilizing about $300 per month on average of this Google Grant. So
Wow.
they have that $10,000 budget available to them, but just because they don't have the experience or they don't have the time, they're not actually able to utilize that full grant. So yeah, we run into that a lot where organizations just don't know how to maximize it. So they come to us and say, "Hey, can you help us actually get that full 10,000 ad spend and really drive the right people to our website with that.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Well, especially with a local church context, um, it seems like it would be such a huge driver for people looking for a church in their local context,
yeah,
right? Like with Google being able to like the local Google business being able to have ads that drive to that, for searching, churches near me. That seems like that would be a huge value add to most organizations, especially the local church bodies.
yeah, it really is. And that's obviously one of the bigger areas that churches want to utilize the grant for. Um, but with it being $10,000 in ad spend, to be honest, it's hard to spend that full 10,000
Mm,
when you're just targeting for a church, for example. It's hard to spend that full 10,000 if they're just focusing on keywords like churches near me.
right.
And by keywords, I mean search phrases that people are typing into Google. There's just not enough people in their area, especially if they're in more of a rural area. There's not going to be enough searches for that. So that's definitely the first thing that we would help the church to create as a campaign around, churches near me or churches in Austin, or online church. But
Mm-hmm.
what we really get passionate about is, and this is what we help the churches do as well, is helping helping people to find churches when they have felt needs, some kind of a
Mm,
deep need or a big life event that's happening in their life right then. What we would love to see is churches and ministries being at the top of Google, answering these big questions that people have.
yeah.
So that's a big part of the ad grant spend for a lot of our church clients. Is, yes, we're helping them with the churches near me campaign and the online church campaign. That's extremely important. But also reaching people who are not churched and are not necessarily even looking for a church, but they
Mm-hmm.
might have some big question like, I'm struggling with anxiety. What do I do? Or my marriage is failing. What do I do? Or how do I be a better parent? How do I not get angry at my kids, or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
is? The church might have a resource for that. They might have a support group. They might have a sermon on that topic. They might have a blog post on that topic. And then, of course, through that, they can, encourage those visitors on their website to take next steps after that.
Mm.
But it really is an awesome, the Google Ad Grant can be used as just an amazing tool to reach people in the church's community, who's not necessarily looking for a church.
Yeah. Well, that's the incredible thing about digital, that it is it's there at the right time. Like that's where we're running in our darkest moments now.
Yeah.
Um, the statistics around that are significant, right? When I'm in the darkest, deepest depths of my depression, what's the place that I probably go to figure out how to solve that problem?
Yep.
Google. Like, how do I deal with my depression? How do I get out of some type of addiction? And if a ministry or local church body has an addiction recovery ministry, and they're running content and providing resources and answering those questions when people go to Google to and ask those questions, if the church is showing up as the resource in response to those rather than all the other secular options that could exist,
Mm.
that begins to be an important tool in being where people are in their darkest moments. Like, the reality is Jesus entered into those darkest moments. He didn't stay out on the sidelines and wait for
Exactly.
people to come to him. He went to where they were. And so, um, digital for churches, for ministries, offers this opportunity for us to enter into that space and be where people are. That's the
Mm.
reality is that's where our attention is. And so as the church, we need to be there. We need to be creating content in those spaces.
I
So that's cool.
100% agree. And there's a lot of churches and even ministries now that are still, I think since 2020, since COVID, that has changed a lot. But there's still churches that are kind of, standoffish to that idea
Mm-hmm.
of using marketing. They're like, churches shouldn't be marketing, right? Or churches shouldn't be using ads. You can't sell Jesus or faith.
Mm,
And of course that's true, you can't. But what you can do is you can use digital marketing. That's just a means to communicate
Right.
to people nowadays. And especially with the, on Google search and the algorithm, it can be really tough to show up at the top of Google. And ads make it a lot easier to do that.
Mm.
Um, and I think any time that any period of time that believers are in, we do need to learn how to use the present technology to
Yeah.
reach people with the gospel. I've been reading actually a book recently called Meta Church. I don't know if you heard from Dave Adamson, and he has had some great snippets in there. One that it caught me. I was like, oh wow. He said that uh, Paul knew how to use the technology of his day, and the
Mm.
technology of Paul's day was writing. Um, and for him, Paul, even he wasn't doing a ton of speaking compared to others. He did a lot of writing, right? And
Hmm.
especially when he was in situations where he couldn't actually speak to others, he did writing. And if you don't know what writing is, it's basically where you take a pen and you put it to a piece of paper and you write.
Hmm.
But that was the technology of Paul's day in a way, and it was extremely effective. And if he didn't use
Right.
that technology, we wouldn't have so many books of the Bible right now. And it's some people might see that as kind of far-fetched, but I look at that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's believers need to use the technology of their day
Hmm.
to reach people. And as long as it's an ethical means of doing that, and then that's amazing. We need to find ways to reach the people because everyone is online nowadays.
Hmm.
That's just that's the fact of it. And yeah, maybe it would be. I mean, I personally think it would probably be better if people were on social media a lot less.
Yep.
But the reality is, I can't change that. People are on social media. So, how do I reach those people, especially those kids nowadays that are spending so much time on social media?
Hmm.
Um, we need to go out into the world and reach those people where they're at. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Go where they are.
yeah.
As you guys have built a company and worked with clients in this space, what are some of the unique challenges and struggles that you have experienced over the years helping ministries, churches, organizations take full advantage of that ad grant?
Yeah. I think definitely the beginning, figuring out, hey, how do we actually, how do we really maximize this? And over time, we realized, okay, it really comes down to having valuable content and being able to, at least what we see with a lot of churches that are trying to do this on their own, um, they run into the issue of they're not creating relevant enough ads. The ads don't necessarily match the search phrases well enough, and then they're not directing someone to a specific enough page on their website.
Mm.
Those are some things that our team has learned over time and figure out, hey, we really need to make sure these are extremely relevant, and we need to provide the best answers and the best content to people searching on Google. Um, with that being said, there are still struggles today, and a big part of that would be some of the limitations of the Google Ad Grant. So it's the Google Ad Grant, while it's you have $10,000 in ad spend, which is amazing. It doesn't always work for more competitive keywords. So in other words, so Google can't cannibalize its own product. So let's say that there's a nonprofit using the Google Ad Grant, and then there's a paid or a for-profit or even a nonprofit using their own money to bid on ads, and they
Hmm.
both bid on the same keyword. Let's say they both bid on churches near me. The church that is using their own budget, their own money, is always going to show above the grantee. Um,
Okay.
and so that's where the challenge is. If there's a very competitive keyword in a certain area, then it's going to be hard to show up at the very top of Google. And this is where we have to get creative with what kind of keywords we're targeting. So this is where our team is constantly having to do keyword research to figure out, okay, what are people searching for, in your area that is highly relevant to your nonprofit or to your church, um, has low competition, meaning there's not a whole lot of organizations bidding on that keyword, and has a really high search volume. A lot of people are
Mm.
searching for that topic. Once we find those keywords, those are the ones that we target, and we make sure that the organization has content on their website that's tailored to that topic. So those are, I think, some of the constant struggles of making sure that we're finding the right keywords. But when we find those keywords, that's when you kind of you strike gold. It's like, oh, you got the right keyword, the right content, you can really maximize that Google ad grant.
Mm. Yeah, it just seems like the reoccurring theme keeps going back to making sure that the content you're producing and creating is relevant and specifically is incredibly valuable, right?
Yep.
Like if we're creating good content, if we're creating value and quality in the content that we're producing, then some of the rest of the stuff kind of takes care of itself. It's when we start to just create content for the sake of creating content because someone told us we have to create content and there's no purpose behind it. There's no intentionality or strategy behind what we're creating, that it just becomes this gigantic pool of information that's irrelevant to who we're trying to reach and the audience we're trying to attract.
Absolutely. Yeah. Content is huge, and the right content is huge.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, we get that a lot where, we have clients they'll create a blog post or something that say, hey, can you promote this? And that's where we have to explain, well, there, no one's searching for this topic, so it's going to be hard.
We can.
Yeah, we
We
can, but
can
you're
promote
not going to
it.
get anyone on your website. So rather than, like quantity of content, it's more the quality of content,
Mm.
and really the relevance of that content.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. I want to shift a little bit, and this is a question I'm really interested in diving into with you. But we've seen a lot of voices suppressed over the last couple of years with big tech companies like the Googles of the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How has that impacted you and your clients, specifically in the Christian ministry church space?
Yeah. That's a good question. Um, so I've seen over the years, it's obviously Google, Facebook, it's been, various platforms. Um, and in terms of Google, I think we've been fortunate recently with a lot of the uh, Christian ministries and church clients. So far we haven't had anything significant yet,
Mm.
and I hope that it stays that way. But we definitely have run into issues with, um, you know, uh, so for example, if we're trying to target certain keywords with like Christian in it. If someone's actually looking for, hey, Christian sermons or Christian, devotionals, we can still bid on some of those keywords, but what we can't do is we can't actually Google doesn't allow us to see the number of searches that are being done every month.
Oh,
On
interesting.
So like for the keyword Christian, there's no data on that. And I haven't actually, honestly, I haven't looked in to see if that's with every religion or if it's just Christianity, or it could be that it's with every religion. They don't give that because they don't want you thinking of, hey, targeting a certain religion. But in reality, there's people, if you're doing Google search ads, it's not like it's Facebook ads where you're showing it to everyone. With Google search ads, you're just targeting the people who are interested in that, who are searching for that.
Right.
So it does seem funny to restrict anything like that if someone's actually actively looking for it. We have run into issues with certain organizations like pregnancy centers or pro-life organizations, um, where there's a lot of it comes down to, unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to politics, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't fit, someone's agenda, then they're gonna cancel it, right? Or they're gonna take it down.
Right.
So with things like pro-life organizations, I mean, I remember an instance where, people they tried to have an abortion. They took that pill, and then they immediately regretted it and realized, no, I don't want to do this. And so of course, where do they go? They go to Google and they search how to reverse an abortion. And sadly, that was not allowed. You weren't allowed to bid on those keywords.
Interesting.
Whereas Planned Parenthood is allowed to bid on, you know, how to get an abortion, but no
Right.
one's allowed to bid on how to reverse an abortion.
Yeah.
Which is really, yeah, it's sad. And it goes all, they say, oh, it's not proven with medical, which, you get that over the past couple of years, you get that all the time where, people are saying, oh, that's an unproven medical, thing, but it's working for people. Right. And in this particular instance, it was saving a ton of babies. So
Mm.
that was sad to see that. In terms of the church side, thankfully we haven't had anything significant right now. And I really hope that it stays that way.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Um, I mean, it doesn't trajectory doesn't seem like it looks all that
Yeah.
encouraging, but you'd hope that they would, especially in situations where ministries, churches, organizations, nonprofits, just in general, are paying for these services. I mean, obviously,
Mm.
in the case of the Google Ad Grant, Google is giving this away, so there's not really money being exchanged in for this grant, but especially for churches that are trying to use that are spending real dollars to get Google to push their content um, with real dollars spent, like you'd think that they would that money would talk, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that remains the case, but I don't know. We'll
Right.
see.
And I think it's. I mean, I say I hope. I hope that this is not. It's not going to be something in the future, but it very well could be something where eventually churches don't have access to this anymore, or
Mm,
and particularly with Google Ads and the Google Ad Grant. I mean, Google has sunset programs in the past where they've said, "Hey, we're not going to offer this anymore." Um, the current clients are grandfathered in, which
okay.
hopefully that's the case for something like the Google Grant. If they decide, "Hey, we're not going to offer this anymore," hopefully whoever has the Google Grant now will continue to be able to have it into the future. That's probably
So
one of the better case scenarios.
if you're listening, get on board and get with Click Nonprofit right now and start taking advantage of it so that you're grandfathered in the event that that
Right,
happens
right.
in the near future
In the
or
near future.
not.
And that's the best case scenario, right? I mean, so
All right.
it could be that it is taken away completely. But I appreciate that, Zach. That's good.
Yeah, of
um,
course.
so so if it is taken away, and that's possible that this could be, and maybe it would even be targeted, like religious organizations can't have this anymore, right? Then if they were to do that, then that would be unfortunate. But for us, what we see is, the Google Grant is not going to be that. Even now, it's not the silver bullet, right? It's one piece to that marketing puzzle. And really, what it comes down to, and what we've discovered over time, is it really does come down to having valuable content,
Mm-hmm.
and content that meets the needs of people. And that's gonna, if you're not ranking on Google with the Google Grant, then if you're producing this valuable blog content or whatever that might be, you'll start to rank organically on Google, right? Through
Mm-hmm.
SEO, through search engine optimization. um, and so my thought is, hey, if something like this Google Grant does go away, the producing valuable content and having it on your website, telling stories, having that on your website is going to be huge, because as we're talking about these big tech companies canceling and removing accounts, this has been happening across social media platforms. And I mean, churches have run into this with Facebook. They've been
Mm-hmm.
completely deactivated for who knows the reason. I mean, crazy reasons
Right.
that they've been deactivated and they shouldn't have been. um, and the best, in my opinion, the best thing to do is get your website up to par, right? Make sure your website has great content. Make sure you're directing people to your website always. So if from Facebook, direct people to your website. From Google Ads, well, you can only direct people to your website from Google Ads, but direct them to Google to your website. because your website is something that you own, whereas Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all of those, you're just renting space, right?
Right.
And so the big thing is really develop your website well, and find ways through creating valuable content to help your website rank on search engines
Mm-hmm.
and so on. I think that's gonna be the best thing to do to future proof your online presence in ministry is your website.
Mm. Yeah. Well, it just comes back to what marketers have been screaming at for years now is create valuable content. Just focus what Gary Vee talks about this
Yeah,
constantly.
yeah,
Content is king. And so that has to be the focus, right? If in
yeah.
this day and age where digital is so important within the context and discussion of marketing,
Mm,
like content is incredibly important. And the thing about within the, especially a church context, like the amount of content that we're already producing every single church through sermons and weekly Bible study pieces of content and all the whatever sermon bumpers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's endless the
mhm.
amount of content that we are producing. Like to you're already producing good stuff. Why not take advantage of this opportunity to run free money from Google on the content that you're already pushing out?
Yeah,
Or if you're not recording it, like you've got a sermon every single month or every single week that you could be producing a podcast and a video out of, and then running content and running ads on that content and pushing it
absolutely.
into digital. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think COVID really made a big push for most churches into realizing the importance and significance of digital. And I think that that trend will continue to rise as we see things continue to move in this direction over the next couple of years. But
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting space. I see the pushback. Like I understand, man, the the negatives of social media, what
mm,
that does in my own life, what I know it
oh
could
yeah,
do to my children, what I have seen it do to our culture and our society, not just ours in the States, but globally. Like there's not much that's good about what's coming out of social media and the
yeah,
statistics that follow. But again, back to where are people spending their time? Where is attention? And if we look at Christ's ministry and his intent and focus was to go where people were, to God meets us where we're at,
mm,
right? And so as the church, we need to be doing that. And the reality is people are spending their time in digital. And so how do you like I've struggled with that balance. Like how do I argue for the sake of content production in this digital space, specifically social media, and all while realizing that I feel like I'm also adding to the problem. Like continuing to produce content in this space seems like it's adding to people spending more and more time in digital. And
right.
man, that struggle's real. I don't know. I
It
don't know how
is,
to answer that. Um, I don't
and
know.
I
I don't know how to go, where to go from there, but
and to be honest,
it's,
I'm there with you. That's been hard for me too. Of
yeah.
and I feel like I'm typically the type of person that you'll see I'm not extremely active on social media myself for
Mm,
my personal account, and that's been, yeah, part of it has kind of been, I wanted to push away from that because it just seems so fake,
mm-hmm.
I'd rather be in person. And I have similar thoughts of you. Is I mean, my one of my biggest fears um, is for my kids growing up in this
Yeah.
world of social media. Um, but yeah, the reality is this is the world that we live in, and this is where especially the next generation is spending all of their time.
Mm-hmm.
um and uh and so it should be the place where, yeah, the church is going out and sharing Christ's love with people,
Mm-hmm.
where they're at, right? And of course, this doesn't say, speaking in the church, along the church world, it should, in-person attendance should always be the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Getting people to meet in person is huge. um, and but also, and obviously, in-person outreach in your area. That's extremely important. There's nothing. I mean, you need to be face to face with people, but
Well,
um,
it's hard to actually serve physical needs in a space that's not physical,
yeah,
right?
right,
And
exactly,
if we're called to be the hands and if we're called to word and deed, like the deed part can't happen in the digital space. Like
yeah,
serving physical needs is really difficult in that space. And so there has to be an understanding that, like, yes, this is an incredible tool, an incredibly powerful tool to reach people, to engage with people, to build relationships with people, to even build community,
mm,
but it can't stop there.
right,
And that's one of the things that I see. We do talk a lot with a lot of ministries that are specifically only in the digital space. And that's one of the problems that most of them run into is they have a ton of engagement, they have a ton of influence, and there's a lot of people relating to and engaging with content around Jesus or questions about Jesus or questions on how do I deal with my depression, and my content around Jesus's answer to that pops up and I engage with that person in some type of digital um, communication platform. But getting from that kind of engagement and relationship into real face-to-face disciple making opportunities is a barrier and a problem that every single digital ministry I've ever talked to runs into.
yeah,
And so how do we use this tool that is incredibly powerful for engagement, incredibly powerful for building relationship and getting in front of people who need to hear about Jesus and are asking questions about Jesus? They're interested, they're open to discussion, they're open to conversing around Christ and what he did, and how do we use that powerful tool, and then but how do we take it further? It can't end there. It can't all be, I don't think. Like, I know that the organizations that are running, that are planting churches in the metaverse and who are doing church in VR and AI and all the different things
right.
that, like, all the different cool, innovative, fun things that you can do in
Oh,
digital space, would
yeah,
argue against me on that. I just don't see how,
which is
like,
crazy.
true
Yeah,
disciple making actually takes place. I think it just really is this incredibly powerful tool to engage and build relationship, and then drive to and build towards real life on life, face to face interaction and disciple making opportunity.
yeah,
And so, man, I just don't think we can ignore this tool. I think it's dangerous if we ignore it and don't use it. Um, I
yeah,
think there's too much opportunity here to ignore it.
yeah. No, I 100%, I 100% agree. Man, the VR space, that does scare me a little bit. That's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, man.
getting it
It's interesting. Like, already video games are so addicting. But can
right.
you imagine a world where I could, with through virtual reality,
Just
jump
live your
into
life. Yeah,
like a Star Wars universe? I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. So, like,
yeah.
I could jump into the Star Wars universe that in five in, in less than 5 years, they're saying that VR could potentially be up to 95 to 99% realistic. Like, meaning our brains will think up to a 95 to 99% that we are living in reality. So
No
if at
way.
99% I'm living in a Star Wars universe, and that's my obsession and my
How
love and my
scary is
idol,
that?
why would I ever come out of that universe into a real world that does not is not that way? I
Oh,
could
that
go
just seems
into
so
a Star Wars
dangerous.
universe and get to be Han Solo for the rest of my life and only have to come out for food and water,
And
and
then you
even
come
that
out of that
probably will be
universe and you
solved.
realize that you're fat and you can't walk
Yeah.
anymore.
It's
Because you
dangerous,
spend
man.
all your
It's
time in
so,
virtual reality.
like, I understand this, what, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word. This conflict between, this is an incredibly powerful tool. We
Yeah.
probably should be using this, but also it's detrimental to society and causing all kinds of significant issues. And those are only going to get worse as technology gets better and better.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And
I
playing
wish
as
I
an
knew the answer.
agency playing in that space and encouraging ministries into this, like, I feel the tension. Like, you need to be doing this, but
Yeah.
also it's disastrous and you got to be careful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess if it were the place where literally everyone was spending their time, kind of like now, everyone's spending their time in social media, then yeah, that there'd be have to be some way to reach people there. But I'm still in denial, I guess. Just
mm.
hoping that doesn't happen. But that's where it's
Yeah.
going.
Well, hopefully the Lord just comes before we have to answer
Yes,
those
hopefully.
problems. That's what we can hope. So, real quick, I want to take a moment to hear from today's sponsor. So, we'll be back with Judson in a minute. And for this episode, you're going to be familiar with our sponsor because it happens to be Judson and his team at Click Nonprofit. Hey, ministry leaders. Today's episode is sponsored by Click Nonprofit. Are you looking to grow your ministry but don't have the money or marketing knowledge to make that happen? There's good news. Google offers an advertising grant to churches and ministries that is worth $10,000 per month. This means that if your ministry is a 501c3 nonprofit, you are eligible to receive $120,000 per year in free advertising dollars. This allows you to place ads at the top of Google search results page and drive thousands of visitors to your ministry website every month. Our sponsor, Click Nonprofit, helps your ministry acquire this Google ad grant and then manages your Google ads to ensure you get the most out of the grant. Schedule a free consultation at clicknonprofit.com to learn more about how this grant can help your specific ministry. Mention the Ministry Growth Show when you sign up and get 20% off your first 3 months of management. All right, welcome back to the Ministry Growth Show. We're talking with Judson, who runs the company you just heard from in our today's sponsor. Judson, we've talked about the importance of content, the importance of content specifically for the grant, but just in general, in our general marketing practices. Has it been a challenge to get your clients to create content consistently? We've kind of touched on that a little bit today, but maybe specifically, what are some strategies and some tangible things that ministries can do to be consistent in their content strategies? Like we know that that's so important, is this consistency in a digital space. What are some tangible things that they can do? Some ideas that you can give them to say, hey, I could go start doing that on a regular basis.
Great question. Yeah, and yes, it has been a challenge. And I mean, you know, a lot of ministries and churches, nonprofits, they have a ton on their plate already.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of having to create content, you know, create blog posts, whatever that might be, video content on a regular basis is daunting for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you'll see them create we'll see them create a bunch of content, you know, right off the bat. They'll you know, maybe create 3 blog posts in a month, and then they'll take a month or 2 break, and then they'll try some more again.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with that is the consistency. You know, there's no consistency there. And what we always recommend is find that amount that you think you can do and try to stay consistent with it. Like, you know, one idea is, you know, a podcast, right? It's a consistent thing that happens. The same thing should be with your blog post or whatever content you're putting out there. Because basically what Google does, at least from a search standpoint, Google sees that, hey, they're producing content or publishing content on their website every week or every month. And so Google knows to crawl their website that often, you know? And
Oh, okay.
so you want to stay consistent to encourage Google to continue to crawl your website and index, you know, to
To
show your
continue to
pages on.
come back to the site.
Exactly. I mean, so
Interesting.
from a search standpoint, that's important, but it's also important from a user standpoint as well, right? Of users know that, hey, I can come back this, you know, every so often to see that new content. So the the consistency is important. It doesn't have to be every week. You know, it doesn't have to be even every other week. Depending on what you can do, just try to be consistent, even if it's every month or so. And I think the thing that is another thing that's kind of daunting for these ministries is that they just don't know what to write on. And
Mm,
or they write something and they don't see any results, and so it's discouraging. And so it really comes down to, you want to make sure that that content is quality. You might write 3 or 4 blog posts on a certain topic, and they're just okay. They're not long form content. They're not super focused on a specific keyword. And then another organization just writes one blog post and it's focused on the topic, the keyword topic that people are searching for, and it's a long form piece of content. It's let's say 1,000+ words. uh, that organization that wrote the blog post, that just that one blog post is long form quality content, they're going to get a lot more out of that one than that other organization is getting out of the 3 or 4.
mm,
So yes, consistency is important, but quantity is, or sorry, quality is extremely important as well. And to to really write great content, we always encourage people, hey, start with keyword research.
mm.
Figure out what are people actually searching for on Google. And it sounds kind of daunting, keyword research, I have to do this super tech type of thing, I don't know how to do that. There are tons of resources out there that show you how to do it. And there's tons of free softwares that you can use on keyword, to do that keyword research. And really, it just comes down to figure out what are people searching for in your area. Or if you're a national organization, you don't have to worry about your area as much. It's just what are people searching for that's related to your organization or your cause.
Mm-hmm.
And then see how competitive it is, see how many you can, with these tools, you can figure out, how many people are searching for it. And I'm sorry, you can find out how many people are bidding on that keyword or how many people are writing blog posts on that keyword. And that's how you can figure out, hey, how competitive is it? And then make a list of keywords that you want to write on. And then whenever you have that time, write a blog post on that topic, and put it out there, or put a video out there on that topic, or whatever that is. Um, and that's what we recommend. But of course, it is a lot for some organizations, but it's so important to
Mm.
continue to write quality content. We've started to offer content writing services to some of our clients, just because they're like, oh, we have so much to do, we can't even focus on this. So we have started doing that. So if you don't have the time, I would highly recommend finding some organization. I know you guys are amazing with content. Finding an organization that can write content. And if you want incredible content, you find someone like Reliant Creative that can actually tell stories and write content based off of highly searched topics. If you can tell a story and write content based off of a highly searched topic, you've hit gold. So if you
Well,
want
thanks,
that,
man.
you
I
go to
appreciate
Reliant Creative. But
that. A little
um,
pitch.
yeah, but yeah, it is work. You do have to put in the work, but realizing that in the long run, it's going to help your ministry or organization
Mm.
significantly. Ranking on Google and such.
Well, I'm thinking about this specifically in a local church context.
Yeah,
Like a local church is doing a sermon every single week, right? So there's your pillar piece of content. You're probably already recording it. If you're not, it's not that difficult to do so.
yeah,
And so you've got a single piece of pillar video content right off the bat, and a podcast audio piece of content that can serve as pillar content right off the bat that you're already doing, right? So there's 2 pieces of content a week. From that, could you then also pull the transcript from those audio files and have it as blog written material from that podcast or that
absolutely.
sermon, right? That you can run ads on, and then allow that to drive the content. So this is what we do with our podcast. We'll do the podcast, and then we'll pull from that podcast the transcript, and with some tweaks and edits, write something that relates to that podcast, but is unique in information. So we're not just writing the transcript, although we'll do that, but we'll take and expand on the ideas that we discuss in the show. So you and me are having this conversation. Out of this, we'll have a podcast. We're going to take the transcript and turn it into an article and expand on the ideas that we discussed today and share some additional thoughts on what a ministry could do for their content strategies.
Yeah.
So out of this single podcast, I get a video. Potentially, I could have a video. I could have an audio file. I could have a transcript blog post accompanying that podcast post. And I could potentially have an article that I could run ads on, all without thinking about what I need to write or come up with.
Yeah.
And so just for a church to be able to create content on a consistent basis, there's 5 pieces of content that you've got in any given week from stuff that you're already doing.
Yeah.
And then from that, as pastors are preaching through the word, man, scripture addresses pretty much every single issue that we're going to run into from a sin perspective, dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, how I should live and how I should father my children, how I should treat my wife, how I should, like, all those questions that people are answering in the digital space are answered in scripture. So as your pastor is creating this sermon content, he's probably going to be answering those questions in the content that he's sharing and teaching on through his sermons. And so being able to pull a small little 3, 4, 5 paragraph article or expanded thoughts video out of that sermon series to answer those questions, again, back to how do we reach and engage with people online where they're asking the questions, the deepest, darkest things that they're dealing with. How do we reach and engage with them at that point? Man, answer the questions that the Bible's already answering and put it out online. It doesn't require us to come up with something new all the time. I think that's Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this, who I think I already mentioned. He talks about, rather than coming up with new content on a consistent basis, we're all going to burn out. Like, we see YouTubers getting incredibly successful online, but every single one of them burn out. They burn out in 2, 3, 4 years because, shoot, I don't know what to do now. I've done everything under the sun and I don't know what to produce. Alternatively, if we are simply documenting what we're doing and pushing that out as content, documenting the sermons that you're pushing, documenting and creating content around the Bible studies that you're leading and creating content for, educating in that way, you're going to have a lot longer trajectory of consistent content and output by documenting rather than creating from scratch or creating from just off the top of your head, whimsical ideas. Point. What comes to me in the middle of the night, right? Like, just document. And what I would argue, back to the story stuff that you talked about, is we serve a God that is ongoing and consistently transforming life. It's happening through your churches. It's happening through your ministries. It's happening through every organization that I've ever talked to has stories of life transformation taking place through their organizations because of God's redemptive work. And so we have an infinite number of stories to tell. And when we start telling those stories, coupled with the educational, knowledge-based transfer content that we're producing through our sermons and our podcasts and our weekly Bible studies and like all the things that we're already doing, you add the intrinsic value of storytelling and transformational story that's taking place in our organizations, our congregations, our ministries. Now you've got more than you could ever dream of from a content perspective. Yeah. And so, like, marry those two things together. We talk about content in 3 categories: informational, educational, and inspirational. Your informational content is going to be, here's what's going on at church this coming week. Here's what's going on in our ministry in the next couple months. Here's the gala that's coming out at the end of September. That's informational. Here's what just happened in our context, in our local body or our region of the world in which we're working. Educational is that knowledge-based transfer stuff. Here's our sermon series. Here's our thoughts on, you name the issue. Like, here's our resources for disciple making, our resources for whatever. If I'm a pregnancy center, I can create content, educational content around abortion and what's really going on in that world, educational content around the politics of that issue, plenty of content to be produced in that educational realm. And people love being educated. Tesla does this better than anybody. They say, if you've ever met somebody who owns a Tesla and you ask them about their Tesla, they're going to tell you about how far it goes and how fast it charges and how much money they're saving at the gas pump. And they're going to talk to you for 30 minutes more than you probably wanted them to talk to you about their Tesla. But it's
Yeah.
because Tesla does such a good job of educating their client base and their customers. And so
Yeah.
when we're educated as humans, we naturally want to share that information with the world, with those around us. And so education can be an incredibly powerful tool. And what I see from the church, just large C in general, but both parachurch and local church context, is we're producing more than enough educational content. We're doing that really, really well. The last piece is that inspirational content, the stories of transformation, testimonies, stories of God's redemptive work. That's the thing that we're missing the mark on, I believe, in the church. And that's where I think there's the most potential for growth, the most potential to engage with people emotionally. Because if we can engage with them emotionally through story, if we can inspire people and then support that that emotional engagement with the educational content that we're already producing, man, then it becomes really exciting. Our content strategies take care of themselves. Like they just start, they naturally start happening because all we're doing is documenting what God's doing. We're saying,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to testify of what he did in this life. We're going to testify of what he did in this life. And real stories matter. And they are significant. There's significant implications when we start storytelling. We see it all throughout scripture. And so
Oh,
there's,
100%. And I see that
yeah.
uh, in the church world. If you some churches that we've worked with who have done so well have these amazing stories of transformation on their website,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a huge. And I've even heard from churches how much those stories, directing people to those stories of people who have come to that church, and whether it was they had an addiction issue and they came to the church or whatever that was, those stories are the things that really transform. And I know even personally, it's when I'm, if I'm looking for a church, we recently moved, figuring out, hearing from people, what is your experience been? And hearing those stories are huge. And I know we've
Yeah.
worked with some similar or some of the same clients, and the clients that you've worked with, just by doing, coming out with these amazing stories of transformation, just sharing, and it's just simple stories, right, of how people have been
Mm-hmm.
transformed, help tremendously in growing, the nonprofit, growing the ministry, because that's what donors want to see,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're always trying to tell these nonprofits that we work with. Yes, you get them on your website. Yeah, you get them through educational content or informational content, but especially on that email side, once you get their email and you start following up with that person, you need to tell them those stories of transformation.
Mm.
They're not going to come to the website right off the bat from the Google ad grant and just donate right away, because they don't know you. They
Right.
don't, and what they need to see is these stories of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, it's so true.
Well, and back to that topic that we keep coming back to, this theme maybe of today's episode, where it's digital is this opportunity to engage with people where they're at, where their attention is when when they're reaching out to Google to answer their most difficult questions. Like if I say I'm looking to figure out how to deal with my depression, and I go to Google or YouTube and I search something like how to deal with depression. Imagine a world where the church was testifying of what God's doing in real people's lives on a consistent and regular basis. And something, the first thing that popped up was somebody else's testimony of how Jesus pulled them out of depression and rescued them from that life. And then it was coupled and supported with a sermon article, an article that was pulled from a sermon that answers the question how Jesus addressed depression, or how the Bible addresses depression, or how to deal with depression with Jesus, like some type of content that answers that question, that supports the video that I just watched.
Mm.
Now I'm emotionally engaged, and I'm educated and have been given like this knowledge based, like it's all starting to come together. And now
And there's
there's
so much
so
more
much
trust there
value.
too, right?
There's so much more trust in that
Yeah.
church or that ministry or whatever, whoever it is that's producing that content, that, man, it begins to start opening up opportunities to build real relationships with people
Mm.
in the digital space. And again, how do we get it into real discipleship opportunities, disciple making opportunities, face-to-face interactions? Like if I'm building that trust in the digital space at that level, like odds are they're going to start engaging with me or coming to my local church body or context, because of the value that we've brought, and we've emotionally engaged with them and intellectually engaged with them.
Mm. I'm curious, have you found it to be issue on your side when, you explain the importance of story, and the ministry is, I don't even, how do I even do it? Like, how do I have the time for that? Or how do I
Oh my
find people
gosh.
that even want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What has that been like?
Really difficult. Yeah, getting ministries to tell stories, is as a creative director of an agency, maybe been the bane of my existence. I mean, it's like pulling teeth. And a lot of the pushback that we get, especially with ministries that are working in international context and maybe in specific locations where there's hostility to the gospel, the number one pushback we get is, well, we can't tell stories because we're going to put our partners at risk, or we're going to put our missionaries at risk, or
Hmm.
somebody's going to find out this person's name or their face, and they're at risk of dying or being sent out of their country, or being whatever the case may be, whatever the ramification or consequence would be. That there's such a fear of that happening that they just don't storytell at all.
Hmm.
And man, there's so many ways to storytell without putting people at risk, without giving up their identities. Um, and it doesn't have to be in video form. Like we talked about written word.
Yeah.
Written word is still significant, even within a digital space. There's plenty of opportunity to tell people's story using pseudonyms, not sharing their pictures, not sharing locations, and just sharing the life transformation that Jesus did in that person's heart and life. That we don't have to put people at risk. We don't. It's just. It's. I think it's a cop out because it's a lot of work. There is
Yeah.
there is a significant amount of work, but
And that's what I hear. It sounds like it's the work and the time, and, oh, we don't have the production, we don't have the fancy cameras,
right.
to do that.
But every single one of us has, and my pushback is always this: every single one of us, almost globally, have a mobile device in our pocket that is capable of doing all of these things, creating
Yeah.
audio content, video content, written word content, and sharing stories of transformation.
Right.
And it the only argument that ever comes out that I still have a hard time with is, well, most of our national partners don't have access to the internet or some type of trustworthy,
Mm.
internet connection, or they get so many minutes on their mobile device every month and they can't afford to pay for more. Like, those are legitimate answers to that question,
Mm.
but there's still stories to be told, and there's still ways to tell those stories without having a perfect internet connection. Like,
Yeah.
back to the written word, there's plenty of opportunity to create content with written word, and it can be just as valuable, or it can be valuable enough to be worth our time and investment. But the reality is, look, we live in a digital world. If you're not engaging and relating with people in the places where their attention is, and you're not willing to spend time and energy and money in that digital marketing space, like, where are you spending your marketing dollars? And
Yeah.
if you're not spending marketing dollars at all, that can become really dangerous in how long your organization is going to be around.
Yeah.
The reality is that most of these ministries we're running businesses. And if you want your business to be successful, you have to market the business. And
Absolutely.
so this idea that we just, it's too much work, it's not worth our time, and you need to make it worth your time, and you need to make it worth your while, because that's where it's not only where we're headed, like we already know that,
Yeah.
but there's not much alternative. Like
Yeah.
the alternative is, and maybe it's not an alternative, it still needs to be done, like just hitting the ground face to face, asking for funds, and going to major donors and seeing about investing in your organization through what you're doing.
Yeah.
But even that, like if you don't have a solid marketing plan to be engaging with an audience in a digital space, most major donors are going to say, why aren't you
We
doing
don't
that?
want to. Yeah.
Because they
They're
want to
going to
make sure
see
that,
right through it. You're not reaching people.
right, they want to make sure that you're being the most effective and efficient in your engagement and outreach. And the reality is digital is that. And so if you're not willing to spend time, energy, and resources in that space, major donors, especially as last generation's major donors start to turn into this generation, my generation and younger, if a ministry comes to me and they have no marketing plan, no communication digital plan or strategy, and they're asking for my funds, if I'm a wealthy millennial and younger, like you better have an answer to that question, or you're not going to be around much longer. Like
So true.
that is the world that they grew up in. That is the world that they know. And if you don't have a solution to that plan, they're probably not going to trust you as much as they would another organization that does similar work, who does have a strong plan in that space. And
Yeah.
so that's my pushback. Like it's no longer, I don't think it's any longer it's an option to not be functioning in this digital space. Like the reality is, this is where we're headed. This is where most time and energy is focused. This is where most of our attention is. The stats around that are sad. It's really sad,
Yeah.
but it's the reality. And so you got to figure it out.
So stop moping
And
about it and
it,
just get after it, you know?
exactly. Yeah. And it
Right.
doesn't have to be every single day. Like it can be, you can work towards it, get in the rhythms. It can be a slow process as you figure out what your rhythms are,
Mhm.
what that content production looks like. Start with once a month. And once you get in that rhythm, add it every other week. And once you
Yeah.
get in that rhythm and feel comfortable with that, add more and more. Like
Yeah.
it can't just be this, for 3 weeks, we did a daily piece of content and then we did nothing for 3 months.
Right.
Like you said earlier, that's not going to be successful,
Yeah.
and you're not going to be able to keep up with that pace anyways. Like build towards it,
Right.
it's like slowly build towards it, and then hire and place people and talent into those roles to help you and support you in that way.
Yeah, totally. And
Um,
to your point, like on the church side, churches have so much content. They don't know that most churches don't know how to distribute it correctly, right?
hmm,
And it goes with ministries and nonprofits too. If you're not great with writing, then take a video of yourself, put the video on the website, and transcribe that video of yourself talking about that topic or whatever it is. You know,
mm-hmm.
there's ways to do things more easily. There's so many technologies, so many tools out there, transcription services to make content creation easier.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Well, we're at about an hour 6 here, so why don't we wrap this up? If people want to get a hold of you, Judson, and learn more about Click Nonprofit, how can they do so?
they can head over to, if they want to learn more about what we do, they can head over to clicknonprofit.com. And they can connect with us there. They can also reach me directly at judson@clicknonprofit.com. That's my direct email. I would tell you
Perfect.
my social media as well, but I'm not as active on that.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we'll put that in the show notes and make sure people can get a hold of you if they want to learn more about taking advantage of that Google ad grant. Guys, we started working with Judson, oh gosh, maybe a year and a half ago,
Yeah, I
something
think
like that.
something like that.
And it has been significant for our traffic on our site, for engagement with our brands, for getting notice out there and pushing the content that we've been working so hard to produce. And so it's well worth the investment. $10,000 spend each month is a significant amount of money. And so if you're not taking full advantage of that, it's a no-brainer as a nonprofit. If you've got a 501c3, it's pretty guaranteed that it's pretty easy to get the grant and start taking advantage of it. So definitely reach out to Judson and his team. And if you have any questions on that, they can answer that for you. But Judson, man, I appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us today and share your insights and experience and expertise in this space. We really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thank you so much, Zach. I appreciate you and appreciate Reliant Creative and all that you guys are doing. We should do this again.
Thanks, man. Yes, definitely. I agree.
Awesome.
All right, buddy. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ministry Growth Show. If you've enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a story or expertise to share with other ministry directors and pastors, or know someone who would be a great guest for the show, let us know. We love connecting with ministry executives and sharing their wisdom and insight with our audience. Just send us an email at podcast@reliantcreative.org. And lastly, if you need help telling your ministry's story, we would love to share how we can help in that process. Check out Reliant Creative at reliantcreative.org and book a call today. See you next time.